One of the things that you can often hear me do is really encourage us to look at our wins. It doesn't matter if the win is small or large. The indication of a win means you are making progress. It's so easy to stall out. It's so easy to give up and stop trying. But if you can see your progress, if you can see your wins, then you can mark signs of momentum. And momentum is the very thing that propels us to our goals. One of the things I say often to people is to keep going. It is in our ability to persevere that we achieve success. I am so excited to welcome you to the second anniversary of this podcast. I have an excellent guest that I want you to meet again. So let's get into it. For the longest time, I secretly wanted more. I often found myself shrinking to fit in, settling for what was comfortable, and even selling myself short. Once I finally accepted that we deserve success and we are blessed with the power to achieve it, I stopped playing small. I'm serious about building a life I love, and you should be too. I'm Denise Taylor of DeniseTaylor.live, and welcome to Embrace Your Power. I help women prioritize themselves, their success, and their happiness. Now let's meet this week's achiever, whose story will inspire you to embrace your power and go. Well, welcome once again to Embrace Your Power. Now, this is the place where you can count on me to always encourage you to build a life that you love. Now, if we haven't yet met, I'm Denise Taylor, and I am so excited that you clicked on this podcast today. I am once again in celebration mode. This is the 2-year anniversary of this platform. 2 years of me showing up to make connection with you. I am always here asking you to believe in yourself, to embrace your power, to go for your dreams. And more than that, I believe that God has given you the power to do it. You see, when we embrace our power, we can be, do, have, and achieve what we want. You will unlock satisfaction and fulfillment in your life like never before. And for 2 years now, I have been encouraging you to do exactly that. It's amazing to me what this journey has been. And now we're at a 2-year anniversary of me showing up every week to make a connection with you. In my mind, Thursday is treat day because I know I will be connected with you here. But when I think about where I started and I think about the journey of getting here, I am always overwhelmed and blown away. I was actually just sitting in my car listening to an episode in complete amazement. Amazement to hear my voice and be encouraged by my own showing up. I believe that if we put forth just a little bit of effort to do the work, God will bless the work of our hands. It's kind of crazy because I started out with a completely different name. Originally, the podcast was called Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Happiness. But as with everything, clarity comes in the doing. What I found myself talking about over and over on every episode is the power that God has given us. And what I wanted us to do is to not allow that power to lay dormant, but that we would embrace it and that we would put it into action. So at the anniversary of the first year, that's when I changed the name to Embrace Your Power. And here we are still going strong. So let me just tell you some of the statistics that I am in complete amazement of. We are reaching over 40 countries with this podcast. My voice is resonating in places that I have never stepped foot. And for the listeners who are there in those lands, I want to encourage you to live boldly and vibrantly wherever you are. And I want to thank you for being plugged in with me. And more than that, on this platform, I have had over 75 women join me. I have had over 24 men join me to tell their stories, to give wisdom, to share with you so that you could be encouraged. You see, the Bible tells us that when we take in the testimony of others, we can glean wisdom and we can be encouraged to go the distance for ourselves. That's the crux of having achievers come in and share with us every week. And more than that, we are well over 100 episodes, which is just mind-blowing to me. There is so much richness captured in all of the conversations that I have had up until this point. And it is such a good resource for you to go back and hear from people who have achieved. And I will tell you, one of the things that I'm most proud of is we birthed a sister podcast out of this platform. The I'm the Good Thing podcast is showing up weekly. In fact, there's 3 new episodes every week of I'm the Good Thing. They're 5-minute episodes that are just intended to give you a life wisdom for the day and help energize you to think more positively, more godly in how you approach your day. And so when I look at the success and I look at the blossoming that has occurred, I am so excited about each and every one of those wins. All of them have led up to today, where I am so celebratory, where I am over the moon glad and excited to be here still serving you. Now, what's really interesting to me is one of the compliments I get all of the time is my ability to interview well. And that has too blossomed in other platforms for me. Beyond just starting my own second podcast, I now host a monthly show for the women in podcasting community, where I get a chance to show up and share more of myself and other Black women podcasters. What an exciting opportunity. In addition to that, I have been pulled by my alma mater, Miami University, where I get a chance to host and interview women for the School of Engineering. That to me is exciting as well. And so when the Bible talks about your gift making room for you, that has absolutely happened in my life. And I am always open to opportunities to speak and share even more. So in acknowledging this 2-year anniversary, I thought I would talk a little bit more about the personal journey that has happened for me to get to this day. You see, it all really started for me in November of 2019. That is when I opened the door to getting out of my own way. That is when I heard God say clearly, transcend success and be significant. And what that meant was being seen, being heard, and serving in life-changing ways. And wow, there has been so much evolution in how I have been seen, how I have been heard, and how I have been serving since that time. I am so glad I stuck with it. Now, when I first showed up, I started with this message that I still believe in strongly, and I still say it often, which is we have to be willing to grow personally in order to soar relationally. And I will tell you what I didn't expect is through my speaking that would be required of me. I had been thrusted to take in so much growth and take in so much learning that it prompted a very pleasant and well-welcomed healing journey. I can tell you what was required of me. And going in, I didn't understand this would be required, but now as I reflect, I see 100% why it was required, why it was necessary for me to grow in these ways. You see, what I had to reckon with is things that I left unchecked. I had to reckon with things that I left unresolved. I had to reckon with things that I was unwilling to address. I could not continue to show up and encourage you to build a life that you love while I was leaving those things undone. And in that quest to deal with the unchecked, to deal with the unresolved, to deal with the unwilling, I had to be willing to heal. You see, there's so much that has come out of this, but one of the things that is now my prized joy is the way that I love me. I have been on a journey that has unpacked and discovered ways that I needed to grow in loving myself more. I had to reckon with the things that had me tethered to pain and had me tethered to uncertainty and had me tethered to darkness so that I could get real clear and be able to serve more effectively. Taking that healing journey is one that I am glad that I did. And even more, I am glad that I forged partnership and relationship to do it. And one of the early partnerships that I forged was getting a life coach. Forging that relationship has been a game changer for me personally. Now, Dr. Shanté has been on the platform before. We have heard from her. We've had a chance to experience her, but I wanted to bring her back today and really talk about a healing journey. Dr. Shanté is a certified life coach, a professor, and an award-winning podcast host. She hosts the Whole and Complete podcast, as well as the Believe Bigger podcast. Her sweet spot is the intersection between faith and wellness. She provides private coaching and she helps those that she serves navigate through mental health issues, spiritual growth, and personal development. I forged my relationship with her almost 2 years ago now, and it has been an excellent support for me in my life. I wanted to bring her on because I know how powerful my own healing journey has been to me showing up and feeling better about myself. And I wanted to talk more about that to encourage you in your journey as well. So I'll see you on the other side. So when I was thinking about how to mark this occasion, this anniversary occasion, I thought that it was really important to talk about some of the things that I've learned on the way. And one of them is the fact that you have to bring people into your life to help you get where it is that you want to go. Hence, I have created for myself what I call my personal board of directors. And this personal board of directors, I do not serve as the CEO. I serve as the COA. I am the center of attention. And everyone who is on the board is specifically brought in to make this a safe place for me to blossom and grow. And Dr. Shanté, she's been on the board. She's probably one of the first board members. She joined the board in July of 2021. And what I have discovered that is a unique trait of everyone on the board is they mean business. They are serious. They are straight shooters. And what I found out about myself is that is a necessary trait for me to grow, because they're willing to have the tough conversations and go for the jugular, if I could describe it that way. And it really ushers me to develop and grow. So Dr. Shanté has had an interesting seat in my life. She shows up with wit, wisdom, insight, and experience, and she's watched me evolve. But what she doesn't know is every meeting I show up thinking, this is going to be the last time I meet with Dr. Shanté. And then at the end of the meeting, I'm like, well, what time are we meeting next time? What day are we meeting next time? And it's because the more you seem to unpack, the more you discover you need help unpacking. And so it's such an honor to have her back again. She was here before, and it was quite honestly one of the popular episodes of the podcast is when she joined. And I wanted to bring her on to really just talk about a healing journey because, quite honestly, that's what she's helped me to do. And so, Dr. Shante, I know all that surprised you to hear, but why don't you introduce yourself again for anybody who has not had the chance to meet you just yet?
I must not be doing my job if you haven't been able to get rid of me. I kid. That's always such like a great like, and it's funny you say this because I have had clients that I felt had graduated, had reached the mountaintop. I'm like, I'm really proud of you. Look at where we started and look at where you are. And they were like, what are you talking about? I said, and the beat goes on. So, I just appreciate the work that we've been able to do. I'm Dr. Shante Holley. I'm the host of Whole and Complete and Believing Bigger podcast. And I run a digital wellness platform that is focused on wholeness, happiness, and health, wellness. I am really passionate about living a whole and complete life and helping people dismantle all the barriers and the obstacles that keep them from doing that.
That is such a great introduction. I think the way that I made connection with you was really interesting. It was through binge listening to the podcast, and you were coaching me. You were helping me on my wellness journey even then. But then once I reached out and I started having conversations, it just seems like it's gone from one topic to the other. All of them have been relationally, it seems, just really understanding more about myself and how I show up. And what's odd is when I first started showing up, I used to say this phrase all the time. We've got to be willing to grow personally in order to soar relationally. But what I didn't recognize is I was going to have to take that journey, that personal growth journey myself in order to show up more relationally strong in my own relationships. And so I don't know what your journey has been like. When you think about yourself, did you ever think that you would be showing up to share your life the way that you do?
In a word, no. I am, nobody believes this, and I say it all the time. I am a classic introvert. I am, and I think that when people hear that word, they just immediately assume shy and reserved. But what introversion really is that we are able to generate our own energy. Like we're able to charge our own batteries. And when we have to pour out or when we have to interact or engage, we come back home with our batteries on like empty. We like, okay, wait a minute. I done gave all I can give, like how James Brown used to give it all on the stage and somebody come throw a cape over his shoulders. Like that's how introverts, you send us to one networking function and all of a sudden it's like, oh Lord, and we need support. But I never did think that I would be sharing my life in this way, that the experiences that I've had and the growth that I've done and the lessons that I've learned, that would be the channel by which most people know me. I can say that I always knew that my gifts were speaking and teaching because your life is always speaking to you. It's always giving you some sort of clue. When I went to college on scholarship for speaking. I was winning speakers tournaments. But being able to be as passionate as I am about mental health and wellness and relational wellness and how important that is, and having a healthy relationship with yourself, I never thought that my life would be the vehicle to bring all of that to fruition.
So, in this journey of serving, what has been the biggest lesson for you personally to be able to show up and serve the way that you do?
I would say that you can't give what you don't have. And I have lived the life where I was a public success, but a private mess. I know how to make it look good. I know how to make it sparkle, know how to make it shine, know how to get people saying, yeah, child, okay, girl, say it, sis. I knew how to do all of that. I knew all the cues. But then, when the curtain closes and I'm going back to this life that is characterized by broken relationships, characterized by overeating and over drinking and coping and stuffing my emotions in a bag and, and fawning, to try to keep the peace and all of those things. And after a while, that catches up with you. When you don't deal with those issues, they will absolutely deal with you. And so that is where I started to learn how to live in what I call integrity. I think that whenever people hear the word integrity, they think like from a morality perspective, like, you're the type of person that would, steal somebody's quarters off the dresser. No, it's not that. Integrity, from my perspective, is one that speaks to wholeness, one that is intact and unbroken, that things are in alignment, that what you say and what you do is in alignment with what you think and what you believe and what you affirm in your life, that there is no quote unquote version of you that isn't consistent, And so I realized that I could not do the work without doing the work. You can't fake the funk. You can't just try to stay one lesson, one sound bite, one, amen ahead of the crowd. You actually have to be about that life. Otherwise, you are living out of integrity and you're being inauthentic.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I wrote down here, I said, as I was taking time to reflect, I think the biggest lesson for me is that my healing was required of me. And I don't think I really realized that I had so many areas that needed to be addressed. And I came to this conclusion that said I couldn't excel in God without healing the parts of me that I left unchecked, unresolved, and unwilling. And it has been such an incredible journey personally to be courageous enough to go after the unchecked, unresolved, and unwilling areas of my life. And I'm still on that journey. I haven't arrived, but to your point of walk it like you talk it, I believe that in order for us to elevate, we've got to go through that excavation process. And it's some messy stuff down there, man, and I see why we glossed over it and said, let me just sit this over there, because when you start unpacking it, it doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't smell good. And the liberation that's really freeing is on the other side of you dealing with it. And so you have a unique seat where you sit and you help people navigate through this. Mm-hmm. What do you say to all of that when you're watching that blossoming, or you're watching that stall out, or you're watching somebody just straight up retreat back to what was comfortable? What do you say from your seat about that healing process?
So one thing that I can say about my life, because my life, as I have said on my podcast many times, has not been some crystal stair. Okay. Baby, I have been through some things. I have survived some things. And as they like to say in the church, I don't look like what I've been through. Right. But going through all of that has given me a tremendously deep well of empathy for other people's issues. And to your point, when you said, I didn't realize I had all of this to unpack, because think about what we're fed, right? There was a time, I can't speak for these, new generations, these newfangled folks, but there was a time where you were considered a success if you made it through school, without too many skirmishes with the law, and you got your education and you came out with a degree and you got yourself a good job with some benefits. Okay. And you were able to buy a home and, be independently mobile and transportation and things like that. That was the gold standard. And if you get yourself a husband and throw a couple of kids in there, or get yourself, a wife and throw a couple of kids in there, that was the gold standard. And so that's what people chased. That's what they pursued. And then they got the house, they got the education, they got the spouse, they got the kids, and were like, Keith Sweat, something just ain't right. Like I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled. Our communication patterns are distorted and disjointed. And so from where I sit, it's like I understand why you're spiraling out, because the same parents or the same family that may have pushed you towards education, that may have pushed you towards, wealth and prosperity and home ownership and all of those things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But did they push you towards wholeness? Did they push you towards, setting boundaries? Did they push you towards being able to be vulnerable and admit when you have done wrong? And did they provide safe spaces for you to be able to have your emotions and things like that? Did they give you permission not to have it all together? And the answer is usually no, they did not. And so I get it. I get it. And I think what frustrates me even today is how so many people are locked in the chase, in the pursuit of the things. The things. If I become a millionaire, if, I get this big contract, if, I can sit at the table and rub elbows with this person and that person, then it will be all the things. And it's not. It's not all the things, because even with the car, the house, the millions of dollars, and the rubbing elbows, you take yourself with you everywhere you go. And until you deal with yourself, none of that you're never going to be fulfilled in those places, because you haven't dealt with you.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. It's so interesting because I was having a conversation with Chuck about a friend of ours who unfortunately is going through a breakup of his relationship. And that's exactly what I said. This is not the first relationship that has ended. And it's because he takes himself wherever he is. And until he is willing to deal with the things that are going on with him, he is not able to show up in the relationships as open and available to be able to allow the relationship to nourish. And I don't think we are always so willing to do that me work, to look in the mirror, to deal with our stuff. And we just kind of ping pong through and assume acceptance, assume you're going to accept me being me just being, it is what it is. And what I found, I reached the point where I wanted it more because it felt right to me. And I was not truly prioritizing myself in a way that felt right to me. And I had to make some very courageous choices, some very courageous moves and shifts, but they all feel so good to me. But on the outside, there are probably people scratching their head, kind of wondering, she left her job, she made this change, she's trying to start this business to serve other people, and it looks strange, but it feels right. And having the courage to do that isn't always understood. And it took taking those healing journeys. It took taking those navigating through all that stuff that I left as remains to help me feel confident and comfortable with that. But I don't think people get that. I don't think that they get on the other side of dealing with it, that it truly is liberation. And I love how your whole mantra of 2023 is, what are you available for? Because that is when you reach the point of understanding your terms and understanding what you are willing to allow in your life.
Let me tell you something. Let me throw a little bit of a monkey wrench, because you have to parse out and you have to disaggregate the portions of this that are systemically racial. Okay. White people, one of the byproducts of white privilege is that they have the luxury of being rugged individuals, meaning that when they do things that are out of the main, okay, it is attributed to that one person, that one, that person is solely responsible for their actions. Black people don't have that. So when we do things that are out of the main, there are collective stereotypes and consequences and social forces that are like, you know how they are, you know how they do. And Black women understand this more than anybody else because we're always conscious of when our slip is showing or when another sister's slip is showing. And so we have this built-in collective consciousness by virtue of being Black women in the United States, where because we know that there are social consequences and because we know that there are cultural consequences, we are more willing to be accountable to one another. We're more mindful of the aesthetics of how certain things look. We're mindful of the double standards that exist for Blackness and maleness and being a woman and all the things. On my one of my recent podcast series about men and mental health, that level of accountability does not exist in the same way. Do you do, hey bro, there's that holding one another's feet to the fire and saying, hey, there's some collective consequences for the way that you're showing up. Men do not engage one another in that same way. Black men do not engage one another in that same way. And unfortunately, a lot of them have fractured relationships with their fathers, if they even know their fathers. And so that dynamic of where and who is going to tell you that you need to look at yourself? Who's going to tell you that the emperor has no clothes? Who's going to tell you that? And more times than not, the person that tells you that is a Black woman. It's usually your mama. It's like, boy, let me tell you something, and to the extent that he will listen to her or not listen to her, that's debatable. But that level of accountability is not there in the same way that it is for Black women. So we don't have the luxury of just being rugged individuals and the chips just fall where they may, because we know that there's some real tangible consequences for our community, real tangible consequences for our families. And we can't just be out there with our slips hanging in the wind. We're mindful that there are stakes attached. At the same time, you said this piece about people not really, knowing or understanding how critical it is to be relationally sound. Here's the thing. People don't realize how important it is to be good with yourself, to be good with you. Something I said literally just the other day. I said, one thing you will never find a whole person in is a broken relationship. Call it controversial. A whole person who has done the work, who is self-aware, who has dealt with their traumas and triggers and trip-ups, who is conscious of how they show up and mindful of how they show up and has done the inner work and has healed from some things and released some things. Somebody that has done that work is hyper aware of somebody who hasn't done the work. And when they find themselves in relationship with people who haven't done the work, it's like, all of a sudden it's real uncomfortable. All of a sudden it's real hot under the collar. All of a sudden it's like, ooh, I need to create some distance. I need to extricate myself. Something has to change, because wholeness and brokenness cannot coexist harmoniously. It can't happen. When people used to be like, I'm looking for my other half, two broken people coming together leads to all kinds of attachment, dysfunction. But two whole people, whoo, child, that's a powerful thing. And what happens too often is that two broken people get together and they kind of become codependent in their dysfunction. And then when one of them gets whole and the other one is still broken, you have to solve for that equation now. Now some conversations have to be had and some decisions have to be made. But the whole person is primarily focused on, I have to be good with me. And I, at the end of the day, I have to look myself in the mirror and I have to be accountable to myself and good with myself and secure in myself. And when I'm good with me, now I'm going to seal all the work that I've done by providing the appropriate boundaries that are going to keep me in this place rather than losing myself to somebody else's brokenness.
It's interesting because there was a group of us that went out to celebrate one of my girlfriend's birthdays. And we were sitting at the table, and it was a guy who was at a table across from where we are. And he was like an eye shot of us because it wasn't nobody in the restaurant with us but us. It was really kind of interesting because it was a Friday night. The restaurant was completely empty, except for the six of us sitting at a table and him sitting across the way. Oddly enough, there was only one person who was single at the table, and it was the person we were celebrating. Everybody else was in a relationship. And he had eyes for her, right? So eventually we invite him over as we reach the dessert phase. And obviously he can hear everything that we're talking about because the restaurant is completely empty. And we chuckled to ourselves because we think he had about 4 or 5 courses. Like he was locked in, right? He went from appetizers to his meal to dessert to the after drink because he's locked in on the conversation. So when we hit the dessert phase, we invite him over. He sits down, and within minutes of him speaking, I turn to him and say, "You've been on a healing journey. I can tell because of your conversation." It became very obvious to me, to your point, that you begin to recognize your lingo is a little different, your phrasing, your thought process, the
Your
way you're
maturity.
exactly. It's a little bit different. And it was so noticeable to me, not anybody else at the table, where it caught my attention because his perception and the way that he handled interacting in the things that he was saying to the context of our conversation had all of the markings of you've been through some things and you have been healed through that. And so I completely agree with you. But we're talking about this healing journey, right? What is it that people really need to brace themselves for when they decide, I want to start dealing with my stuff, right? Because it sounds very soothing to say, oh, you're going to be healed. And the only thing they have perspective on is a scratch, a bump, a skin knee, that they just watch the skin just come back to life on top of it with ease. There was a little bit of discomfort when the fracture or the scrape initially occurred, but for the most part, the healing journey of that bumper bruise happened without notice. And I can tell you, that ain't how it go down, right? Not at
Not at
all.
all. Not at all. That is so funny. So here's what most people that embark on a healing journey are not ready for and are not ready to hear is the fact that you have to be willing and ready to own your part. Because I can tell you the truth, there are so many people that want to be right about being wronged. And many of us have been wronged. We can fill up a stadium of grievances of people who did us dirty, didn't take care of, neglected, abandoned, abused, like all the things, right? And there's validity in that. Okay. Like there's validity in those experiences and in that pain. But the part that we have to own, the part where we have to look at ourselves and say, okay, in what ways did I make this person think that it was okay to treat me this way? Okay. In what ways did I give my power away by not setting appropriate boundaries? In what ways did I internalize messages about my own worthiness and, allowed myself to be treated as though I was unworthy? That's the part. Like, healing is a mirror and it's a crucible, and you will find yourself in it. You be like, oh, because we tend to have these, elevated self-perceptions due in large part by when people start rattling off their credentials. They talk about the kind of house they live in and the kind of car they drive and the school they graduated from and the kind of clothes they wear and how much they cost and all of that. Right. But that has nothing to do with who you are. That has nothing to do with how you show up in relationships. That has nothing to do with how you handle things like failure, how you think about things like failure, how you recover from things, that don't go right. Do you have a fixed mindset? Do you have a growth mindset?
Mm-hmm.
Healing will show yourself to yourself. There are two things that I can think of off the top, three, okay, that will show yourself to yourself in ways that you never imagined. Three dynamics. Money. Money will expose you, and like it just brings out more of your character and it shows you who you really are. Marriage will show yourself to yourself in ways that you see yourself reflected back in this other person and you like, oh wow, like clearly I have some work to do. And motherhood, marriage, money, and motherhood, okay, will expose you in ways, and healing has the same kind of characteristics of that, is that when you really start uh, analyzing and getting beyond the emotions and getting beyond the feelings, and you really kind of take a step back and you start to see the ways that we can often participate in our own demise. That's the part that we're not ready for. And then once we recognize that we participated in our own demise, now we have to take responsibility and do something about it, because once you know it, you can't unknow it. And I want to go on record and say there are some situations that we had no quote unquote party in. We were set upon, we were victimized, like wrong. Okay. Like, and that part, another part that people struggle with is the radical acceptance part. Radical acceptance is, I didn't deserve this. Why has this happened to me? But because it did, I'm going to accept that it did. And now I'm going to take responsibility for what happens in my life next. What happened then that I didn't have any control over, that I didn't have any agency in, that, just came out of nowhere and shook my world all up. I accept that that has happened. And I also accept that I want to have a life that is not characterized and defined by that occurrence. And now I'm going to take the steps to do something different and move in a different way. So owning your part in terms of how you've contributed to your demise, and also owning your part in terms of being responsible for the healing that takes place afterwards, so that you are not characterized by all of the negative things that have happened to you in your life.
So, one of the things that has manifested in my own life as a result of the journey that I surrendered myself to is leaning more into serving others. In fact, I believe it is my responsibility to transcend success and be significant, which means that I have the privilege to help other people on their journey. I get the opportunity to allow women to tap into my experience, to tap into my insight, to tap into my wisdom, to accelerate their success. And even more than that, I get satisfaction and fulfillment in my own life when I do that. You see, I have been called to do a couple of things, and I know that I do these things well. I have been called to inspire and encourage and empower women as it relates to clarity, confidence, and courage. But even more than that, I have been called to help women leaders, especially women of color and first generation leaders, be successful on their career journeys. And each of those opportunities for me is a blessing. You see, I get to show up leveraging not only the things that I've been willing to surrender and allow myself to grow in personally to help women who need to be empowered in that way, but I also get to leverage my 30-year career and help women in the workplace be career strong to get what they want and what they deserve. I get to be a blessing. I get to help accelerate other women in their journey to success. Now, if any of that sounds like something you want help with, I want you to book a call with me. My calendar is open to you. If you go to www.callwithdenise.live, we can talk. I can get a sense for where you are and where you want to be and what you're struggling with. And if I can help you, I will make a recommendation on how we can partner and I can take you on a journey to accelerate your success. So if that resonates with you, go to my calendar. You can access it again at www.callwithdenise.live, and we can get you to the success that you deserve. Okay, now that we're back, one of the things that sticks out as I reflect over this nearly 16, 18-month journey with you that was probably the most impactful for me, even though I didn't really realize I was carrying so much of it, was navigating through and unpacking guilt, shame, and condemnation. And what I really honestly loved about how you handled me through that process is you asserted me, you took me back to scripture, you helped me to understand where my powers really were. You held me accountable, but you really ushered me to releasing that. And so I would imagine that that shows up in a lot of conversations, the weight of guilt, the weight of shame, the weight of condemnation. And so what wisdom can you share for people who are carrying it and want to navigate through?
Ooh, a couple of things. So you mentioned that we approached this through a spiritual lens, right? And one of the things that I love about God is that unlike many people who open churches in his name, God doesn't do shame. He doesn't do it. I can literally pull out 4 or 5 instances off the top of my head where when somebody tried to shame somebody else, the Lord stepped in and was like, not on my watch. We're not doing this. Okay. We're not doing this. When Martha tried to shame Mary, for washing the feet and listening to, he was like, leave Mary alone. Like, leave Mary alone. When they drugged the woman out in adultery and was like, with the stones, and he said, okay, well, he who is without sin, come on with it. Um, he doesn't do shame, and we pivoted that conversation into a book that I had you read, which was really impactful, which is What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry. And Oprah Winfrey has some parenthetical components of that book as well. But a lot of times when people are acting in ways or showing up in ways that are characterized by guilt and shame, the natural question is, what is wrong with this person? What is wrong with you? And Bruce asked the question like, no, what happened to you? Okay, what happened to you? And when we look at the things that happen to us, things that we want to bury in the backyard, like the dog with a bone, and we dig that up, then it's like, okay, now let's talk logically. Based on, I'll use my example. I'll talk about how I felt neglected and abandoned as a child. I said, okay, based on a child who felt consistently neglected and abandoned, didn't have a father present in her life, and, felt that she was less, and not worthy and all of that. The subsequent behaviors from somebody who thinks that they're less, the subsequent behaviors from somebody who doesn't think that they're worth, the subsequent behaviors seem to correspond to the trauma that happened to them. And so for those of you who are feeling shame about those types of things and the subsequent behaviors that came from the trauma that happened, whether that's somebody that left, I really am such a fan of the ACEs instrument. Is this 10 questions called Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey. So that's what ACEs stands for. And it's 10 questions about any number of traumas that range from physical abuse to abandonment to drugs and alcohol. And so many of us have these things present in our childhood that we have normalized. We have normalized trauma. It really is a luxury. It is a luxury to get through the whole trajectory of childhood. I'm talking 0 to 18 without some major hiccup, without some upheaval, of some kind, without some betrayal of some kind, without some violation of some kind. And when you experience that, especially if you are being raised by people who were raised by people who were raised by people who did not know how to engage these issues and just kept sweeping them under the rug and had all these maladaptive coping mechanisms like not talking about it. I'm not going to tell you who your real daddy is. Going outside and play, shut up before I give you something to cry for, and trivializing things that were really hurtful. It stands to reason why people are carrying around so much guilt and shame and condemnation, because they have not had safe spaces. They have not had containers of support that have allowed them to say, this happened to me and this hurt like hell. And I have all of these feelings about it and I need to know what to do with it, because their parents didn't know what to do with it and their parents didn't know what to do with it. They just sucked it up, soldiered on, and carried their burden in the heat of the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know that that's true for me. I remember the conversation when I was sharing with my mom about the molestation that I experienced. And when I got done, I don't know what I expected her to say, but I didn't expect silence. I didn't expect her to just look at me. And in that moment, I ran smack dab into what you just described, where this person was raised by this person who was not available and didn't know how to deal with what was being shared. And the silence probably killed more than a hug or even just saying, I'm sorry. And so it made it very difficult to navigate that. And so I really appreciated taking the journey through what happened, because it allowed me to realize that there is some conditioning that occurred, but it also allowed me to realize that that's not how God created me. And that I could begin to see myself the way that he created me. I could begin to embrace how he created me and the things that he has to say about me, and uproot all of that lie, uproot all of that deception, uproot all of that stinking thinking by going back to what he says. And I will tell you that the journey is difficult, and I don't recommend anybody take it alone. And I know people try to do it, but if you're trying to navigate through all of the stuff that has happened, the truth that the things that are secret, you shouldn't do that alone. You need someone that's helping you process that, that's helping you reason through that, because it's a heavy load, and being called to sit in the place that you sit. My biggest question is, how do you take care of you? Because it's a lot that gets sent your way. It's a lot that people then in turn pass off to you. You have to have some strategy to take care of yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And before we leave this point, I just want to say something that a lot of people don't realize is trauma leaves gaps. Okay. So I want you to think about a road that is being paved. Okay. And then something happens, and then there's a patch that doesn't get paved. And then, the road goes on, and then something happens, and now there's a patch that doesn't get paved. When you have those types of disruptions, because that's what trauma does, is it disrupts the natural trajectory of childhood. It's the equivalent of going onto Google, putting in a search term, and then the result comes back, no results found. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you share your heart, you share your traumas with people who are not emotionally available because they didn't learn how to be emotionally available because they had parents who were not emotionally available. And it's like, no results found. Mm-hmm. There's a gap where the empathy should be. I don't have. Where the nurturing should be, I don't have. Mm-hmm. And that's where people have to be self-aware enough to be like, you know what? I should be more nurturing in this situation. I should be more sympathetic in this situation, but I'm not. And I need to pull that thread and get to the bottom of why I'm not, because I'm not showing up with the natural cues of humanity where I can properly engage, the fact that somebody just shared this tremendous hurt with me. So yeah, trauma leaves gaps. But in terms of self-care, during the pandemic was a game changer for me in terms of wholeness and wellness. And I really doubled down because it gave me time. It gave me time. All of a sudden, the world was at rest. All of a sudden, not only was the world at rest, but it created, and this did not work out for all people. Matter of fact, it crippled a lot of people. But what it created for me was some necessary distance from people and their thoughts, their interactions, and all the things. And for the first time in a long time, I could really focus on me. I say all the time, I am a woman of a certain age. And when you become a woman of a certain age, then changes begin to happen in your body. I'm a woman over 40. And I was dealing with perimenopause and I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know it was a thing, but it's absolutely a thing. And so when I took this time to go on a health journey, okay, and transform my health, I was able to find things that I absolutely love. Case in point, salsa dance. So I started taking salsa dance classes during the pandemic, and fast forward 2.5 years later, now I'm teaching salsa classes, and it is for me, it's an act of joy and resistance because I was raised to believe that unless an activity is productive, if it's not making money, it's not making sense, if it's not putting food on the table or money in the bank or, and that hustle grind culture, whatever. I'm like, yeah, no, it's not doing any of those things, but it's making me happy and my happiness matters. Mm-hmm. My happiness is right there on par with the making of the money and the having the nice homes and all of that. My happiness is right up there. And that is a game changer because I can't tell you how many people are doing all the right things, following the script, and miserable. Mm-hmm. Absolutely miserable. And so for me, I am always, what's in the forefront of my mind is always, am I living a life that is true to myself? Am I being true to myself? Am I censoring? Am I editing? Am I, shrinking back? Am I playing small? And anytime I catch myself doing that, I force myself to live louder, to be bigger, to be more because I'm not available for less. I'm not available for less. That is my ironclad boundary for the year and probably for my life. I'm not available for that. I'm not available for less. I'm not available for small. I'm not available for lack. I'm not available for scarcity. I'm not available for fear, judgment, worry. I'm not available for that. And when you are rock solid on what your boundaries are about what gets in and what stays out, it's a beautiful life. It is a beautiful life. And, as much as I sympathize and empathize with my clients and the things that people come and lay at my feet, I realize this is key. So don't miss this. The analogy I use is because, I travel too. So I like to, I catch flights and I don't check bags, but on the, sometimes they'd be like, okay, if you're in this boarding group, now you have to check your thing because we're all out of space for your roller boards and all of that. And so I've had the experience where I'm sitting at the baggage claim and the conveyor belt is going around. And in the distance, you see what you think is your bag. And so you start making your way towards, to the belt. And, as it gets closer and comes around, you start to reach over and you're like, oh, that's not mine. That's not mine. And you wait for your actual bag. When people come with issues and problems and concerns and all the things, I am very clear. That's not mine. That's not mine. and I can hear it and I can speak to it and I can empathize with it and I can provide support and resources, but it's not mine to carry. That's not my bag. I got my own bags.
That's so good. What do you love most about what you do?
Oh, that's easy. I am and have been for a really long time in funky, dope love with transformation. For a long time, you know, as I said, I'm a woman of a certain age. And back in the heyday of HGTV, I used to watch those shows. The transformation shows were always my favorite. When you took something that was dilapidated and haphazard and cluttered and just didn't work and function for the family, and then by the end of the episode you're like, you know and what always would the magic is of what got me was the two things. One, the vision of the designer, that you could look into that broken space and see beyond the brokenness and turn it into something. And two, the fact that within that broken space that didn't work, that didn't function or whatever, the potential was always there. And sometimes, and that is such a great metaphor for life, because we think that we have to go by the latest and greatest. We need another audio book. We need another class. We need another degree. And it's like, baby, you have all the things. You don't need another thing. You have all the things. What you don't have is the vision to see beyond the barriers that are in your life right now into what you could really be. So what I love about what I do is seeing the transformation. And it's like, man, thank you, God, that I had a hand in that. And I've had people tell me all the time, like, you saved my life. I was contemplating, ending it all. And you helped me back from the brink by listening to your podcast. You're the reason I moved to Mexico. You're the reason, I started this business. You're the reason I left this toxic relationship. Like, all, man, transformation is hot. It will never not be dope.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. So, so good. All right. Well, we'll see if your answers to my closeout questions have changed since the last time you were here.
Probably. I don't even remember what they were.
All right. Life wisdom. What would you tell your younger self about life if you could?
I would tell my younger self that dogs don't bark at parked cars. Meaning, the reason why people hate on you the way that they do, because they did. The reason why the troubles that you are experiencing in your life, and you've had troubles, is because what you have in you is so tremendously powerful and awesome that the enemy is coming early and often to try to make you tap out on your assignment before you can get to a place, before you can get to a microphone, before you can get to a camera, and let the world know that there is hope, that there is possibility, that there is promise, that there is potential. And so to count it all joy, because the challenges that you are experiencing are just confirmation of how powerful you really are.
Oh, that's so good. So, so good. Love wisdom. What would you tell your younger self about love if you could?
Oh, girl, hold on. I wasn't ready. I would tell myself that love is not just a feeling and it's not just an action, but it's a choice. It is a choice, because there's always somebody with longer hair, with bigger boobs, with a bigger butt, a smaller waist, more money in the bank and what have you. But when you love somebody, you are choosing them every single day. That is not just what you feel, and it's not just what you do, but it's also what you decide.
That's good. Happiness wisdom. What would you tell your younger self about happiness if you could?
That your happiness is more valuable or as valuable than every dollar in the bank. That the real chase, that the pursuit of happiness is as important as the pursuit of any credential, of any, lofty goal, any property investment or what have you, because you can have all of that and not be happy. And so pursue it with vehemence and be unapologetic about it.
So tell us what's next for you and how everyone can get connected.
So I'm currently on sabbatical from my job, and I've been released to do research abroad. Heading back to Europe, which is one of my favorite playgrounds to do some research. Also, I'm being really intentional about mentoring this year. And so I'm offering a couple of opportunities to people to be mentored in small groups because that's really important to me and impactful. And also continuing to do coaching and podcasting. And I'm actually doing more product releases this year. So sometimes people just need actual tangible tools that they can download, print out, and really just get into the work of the work. And so I've really been, and I share things with my clients all the time, but I'm going to make those things more readily available for people to take action. And I have some speaking engagements lined up. So good things.
I love it. Well, success looks so good on you, Dr. Shante.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure we'll have you back again and talk once more and again. And I'll see you, let's see. I think it's about 9 days or so.
Probably so. So thank you for having me. I appreciate you and your audience. Thank you so much. It's just been a blessing.
Absolutely. Well, that's it, beautiful. Thank you for tuning in. Don't ever forget that you are truly blessed with life, love, and all the happiness your heart can hold. Be relentless in building a life you love without apology. I'm Denise Taylor, and you can always find me in our free Facebook community. It's Embrace Your Power, easy to find. Now be sure to rate and review this podcast and share it with a friend. And make sure you subscribe so that we can stay connected each week. And remember, God has not given us a spirit of fear. He gave us power. So be sure to always embrace your power and go.